Just hours from now, Canada will host the G7 leaders in beautiful Kananaskis, Alberta, right there in the Rocky Mountain wilderness. The G7 is a group of the world's advanced economies and democratic nations, plus the European Union, and leaders of those countries gather every year to talk about a variety of issues. Non-G7 countries are also often invited to the summits. This year, 7 non-G7 leaders, Australia, India, Brazil, expected to be there. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were invited, but their leaders will not be attending. Prime Minister Carney has laid out Canada's main priorities for the meeting: protecting communities and the world, building energy security and accelerating the digital transition, and securing future partnerships. Two people who know a lot about what goes on at these summits: former ambassador to the United Nations, Louise, and former G7 Sherpa, Senator Peter Boehm. A Sherpa, for those who don't know, represents the Prime Minister, oversees the negotiations for the country, is highly involved in how all of this unfolds. Nice to see both of you. Appreciate you making the time.
Hi, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Senator Boehm, I'm going to start with you. So we did learn this week that there won't be a joint communique at the summit. What do you make of that? What does that tell you?
Well, that's not unusual, and it's certainly not the first time, because the summit after the last one we hosted was the French summit in 2019. And after the French saw what had happened at Charlevoix, where we did have a communique, they decided maybe it's easier. Interestingly, the G8 summit 2002 in Kananaskis did not have a communique either, and that was right after 9/11. So there are sometimes circumstances that would suggest you don't necessarily need joint and agreed consensual language, and you spend too much time trying to negotiate all of that wording, and at the end you don't get a very good document. So having a chair statement and some separate declarations, I think, is probably a good idea.
So, Louise, Blais, it does seem as though there will be these short statements on a variety of topics. We don't know if all the countries will sign them. What do you make of that approach?
Well, it really de-risks, as Senator Boehm said, the effect of having to water down language. It can mean that all countries can agree to a set of statements, and perhaps one doesn't join one of the statements, but then there's not that sense of disunity. And then also, I'm being told that each of these statements will have an action plan, an action-oriented outcome that they want out of it. So that's also very interesting. It's more driven towards actually getting something done and maybe reducing sort of the ambition, but at the same time getting whatever is agreed upon actually achieved, which is positive.
Yeah, well, that sounds more like the kinds of things the Prime Minister's been talking about anyway. I want to talk about the guest list a little bit. Obviously, the G7, the core group, meeting on Monday, but there are a variety of other nations who have been invited: India, Brazil, Australia, the list goes, Mexico, the list goes on. Senator Boehm, what does that tell you? Saudi Arabia was invited but is not coming. What does that tell you about the Prime Minister's approach and what this summit overall might bring?
Well, first of all, it's a time-honored tradition to have the outreach session on the last day. And so leaders are invited from other countries depending on the theme that is to be discussed. So again, in 2018, we had a dozen leaders come to discuss the problem of ocean plastics pollution, and a lot of progress was made at that time. So too, if you look at Prime Minister Carney's priorities as set out last week, it's some big stuff on the global economy, on catalyzing work on infrastructure, and you need some other players to talk about those things. Having South Africa there, I think, is significant. South Africa is the chair of the G20, and there should be crosswalks between the G7 and the G20. So this will provide an opportunity for some enhanced discussion, and also for some of the other leaders who are coming, opportunities to have bilateral meetings with the host, with Prime Minister. Certainly they'll want to speak with President Trump and other leaders. And of the G7, Japan, the UK, and Germany will have leaders coming to their first ever G7 summit.
You talked, Louise, about de-risking. I don't know that this extended invite list it has the same philosophy in terms of de-risking. Already, obviously, there's been lots of criticism about inviting Narendra Modi. There was criticism about Saudi Arabia, even if the Crown Prince isn't coming. Why do you think the Prime Minister took those perhaps political risks to make sure those invites went out?
Well, I think he's sending a signal. I think he's sending a signal that Canada's foreign policy is changing, that Canada will pursue core interests, whether economic or sovereignty. And I think that all these countries have been invited. There's all sorts of different reasons, as Senator Boehm said. But I note, for example, the invitation to the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, which I think projects a really real leadership on the continent. It'll be her first time meeting the president. When she comes, she's the lucky one. She gets neutral territory. She's not in the Oval Office. But I think that was a really good move on the part of the Prime Minister to extend a hand to Mexico. We know that there's been a few statements that have been made in the past by provincial leaders vis-a-vis Mexico and USMCA. I think with each invitation, the Prime Minister is sending a signal. And so there's form here as well as what will actually happen at the meeting.
I want to talk about two things that could sort of derail or overshadow the summit, and I'll start with the president. Obviously, and Senator Boehm, you have direct experience with this, how the president comports himself, his reactions to things, what might happen, that can derail a summit, even if he has a better relationship with the Prime Minister. What do you expect on that front?
Well, I go against the grain a little bit on these things, having witnessed President Trump in action in 2017 at his first G7 summit in Italy, and then the following year. There's no table thumping or anything like this. He listens. He's engaged in the conversation. He might have a different view than others might, but it's pretty good cut and thrust in terms of debate, and that's one of the big features of the G7, and that also allows for any unforeseen or sudden developing aspects to come to the table, because there is that built-in flexibility and informality.
So, Louise, the other issue that might overshadow or derail the summit is what's happening between Israel and Iran. Could that knock the conversation off onto other things other than trade and all the things that we've talked about here?
Well, it's possible. It's always possible. If it happened, it wouldn't be the first time. We've seen that before. I think that you have to live up to the moment. If there is a burning issue, and obviously an armed conflict in the Middle East is exactly that, then everyone has to understand that that's the priority. But I don't suspect that it will actually completely overshadow all the other aspects. And there'll be a lot of bilaterals that will take place. So I think I really do believe that they will go back to some of the priorities that are important to the president as well. Critical minerals, for example. Ukraine, that's not going to go away. I think they're going to try to balance it all.
But Senator Boehm, there could be tension points there, given some of the positions Canada, the UK, and France have taken on the Middle East versus the way the president has approached it.
I imagine, as we say in the trade, there'll be a full and frank discussion on that, and it will be civil. There are different points of view. There are different national interests, and also the G7 at the leaders level can pivot if a subject suddenly becomes huge and overwhelming. 2008, 2009, I wasn't there, but that was the sovereign debt crisis. Prime Minister Carney was then governor of the Bank of Canada.
Right.
Almost exclusively the summits at that time, Camp David, were focused on the global economic crisis. So there are ways and means of adjusting the conversation, and it will be up to the dexterity of the chair, our Prime Minister, to make sure that goes that way.
Thank you for coming back and letting me tap into your smarts and your knowledge about this. It prepares all of us for watching the next couple of days. Former Ambassador to the UN, Louise Blais, and Senator Peter Boehm. Thank you. Thank you very much.
On a personal level, I've learned a lot from the Prime Minister over the years. I've been a great admirer of his and the values that he's bringing to bear to his government and to internationally, particularly as we go to Kananaskis for the G7.
Mark Carney and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer meeting on Parliament Hill just a few moments ago. Starmer stopped in to Ottawa on his way to that G7. So let's talk more about the Prime Minister's approach to foreign policy with our Sunday Scrum. Louis Blais, the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Radio-Canada, covering the G7. CBC's Jason Markisoff is in Calgary, and Robert Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Louis, the G7 is always important for the Prime Minister, it being his first one as Prime Minister, but also in terms of who he wants not only around the table, the G7's obviously predetermined, but the people joining them on Tuesday for conversations. Yeah. What does that tell you about his approach to foreign policy?
We are hearing more and more about that Carney doctrine, that it's diversify. You know, he wants to open Canada to new economic relationships, and he's been very clear about that, the Prime Minister. He wants to, you know, be less reliant on the United States, a less risky relation. And, you know, for what I'm hearing around the Prime Minister is that he thinks Canada cannot go around the relation with India, for example. It's going to become the third economy in the world that if Canada doesn't seize that opportunity, somebody else will. So they just want to do it now. And also, if you look at the G7 today and the G7 in the past, the G7, the GDP, the world GDP represented about 63%. Now it's 44%. The BRICS countries, the South, the countries in the South are representing now 25% of the world GDP. So they cannot go around that. And I think he's just sending a clear signal that he will diversify Canada's economy, even if it comes with controversy, inviting the Prime Minister of India for the human rights issue.
Rob, what do you make of it? I mean, so he's sort of putting aside some of the maybe prickly politics part of it in favor of all the things that Louis is talking about there.
No, exactly, and Louis is right. I mean, Prime Minister Carney had some political cover, I think, when former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, a Conservative, gave a speech where he said that Canada needs to reach some kind of a rapprochement with India. Obviously, that's a very complicated relationship right now after India allegedly assassinated a Canadian on Canadian soil. That's something that it causes a lot of concern in this country. We talked a lot about foreign interference over the last few years, and that assassination in Surrey is something that is of deep concern. But Carney also is signaling that he lives in the real world, not in the perfect world. I thought that was interesting, Rosie. On Friday, the statement that the Prime Minister put out about the Israel attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, I thought it showed a kind of savviness that was different than Trudeau might have put out. I thought it showed a lot more nuance and a lot more context, frankly. Like he in the statement talked about how Iran's nuclear program has long been a threat to that region. And, you know, he didn't just condemn a unilateral attack by one country on another, which Trudeau might have, you know. I think he's signaling he's a different leader.
And I think signaling too, Jason, that like it really is the economy, stupid. Like this is really what's driving most of his decisions and people that he wants around the table, to Louis' point as well.
Well, with the economic order being so, you know, massively upset by Trump and his tariff approach, you have to make other deals and look to other countries. And Canada has long lived with this, walking contradiction of relations with China, which has many alleged and confirmed human rights violations in Tibet with the Uyghurs, and now, we don't talk about it in this regard, but there could be a time where we start talking about the human rights violations occurring in the United States. Yet we continue to pursue trades with them out of a realistic base. I mean, he is a realist. I think there does come a time when we need to start hearing more about his human rights policy, his foreign aid policy, and maybe that will come. We'll see what kind of statements come out about this. And the other thing he's trying to preserve as well is the rules-based international order. Yeah. And the more people you can bring on guard with, on line with international trade, maybe diplomacy, and there are levers you can use there. So I think there's much more to come, and I think there will become a time when we start to expect more than just a trade and defense policy from Mr. Carney.
So Louis, what is the measure of success for the Prime Minister in particular as the chair of this G7?
I think he wants no blow-up, of the unity around the table. I guess they will not agree on a lot of things, starting about maybe Ukraine, new sanctions on Russia, climate change. There's a lot to disagree about, but I think he will want to at least keep the group together. I wonder if the Israel-Iran crisis could become a a sort of rallying point for the leaders, Rosie, to focus more on the security aspect of the conflict in the region, facing Iran as a common enemy, and less focus on the humanitarian aspect, and the impact of the Israeli operations in Gaza's population. So it might shift the focus a bit for the good. We'll see if it's a rallying point, but we're always, a controversial declaration away from Donald Trump. This morning, he said that Vladimir Putin could play a role as a mediator in the conflict. I'm not sure everybody would be necessarily down with that. He also said that the United States could be involved in the conflict either in the future. He says it's not the case now, but it could become the case. So, there's always those inflammatory remarks that could, break the unity. We'll see where it goes from there.
Okay, Robert Benzie, Jason Markusoff, I'm out of time. Please forgive me. And Louis Blais, thank you for doing this. This is also Louis' last moment on this show as the Parliamentary Bureau Chief out of Ottawa. He's moving to Washington, so I'm going to make him do the American Roundtable next when he moves down there.
I'd be happy to, Rosie.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Happy Father's Day to two of you. Thanks. This isn't the first time Alberta has welcomed world leaders. Kananaskis was also where the 2002 summit took place. You can see those pictures there. For what was then the G8, Russia was still at the table. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien hosted leaders shortly after 9/11. 23 years later, the village is again getting ready for all those VIPs to arrive. Kevin Okabe and Naoko Mabeshi, hello. You're the owners of Moose Family Kitchen in Kananaskis. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting us.
Nice to meet you, Rosie.
So this is exciting for you guys as a small business. Naoko, maybe I'll start with you. What does it look like in Kananaskis right now? Do you get the impression that there are many world leaders coming?
Oh yeah, everybody looks so busy right now and prepare for the big event. And absolutely, so exciting time right now.
And Kevin, is it hard to run a business when there's this? They are saying that this is the biggest security operation in the country's history.
Well, definitely not normal operations out here, but definitely to be part of something so unique like this is an amazing experience. And we're grateful to be here.
And so you are, Kevin, going to be allowed to stay open, and you would imagine that people will come in and out. Is that your hope?
Well, we've been available to service the people that are here. Not sure if we'll be able to stay open for the entire summit itself, but we're here to help in any way we can.
Yeah, and Naoko, you were there, I believe, when there was a G8 summit in 2002. What was that like, and were you able to meet anybody?
Yes, actually, one of the top secretary came to our store, and he was surprised that I'm from Japan. And we chatted, and actually he offered to bring the Prime Minister Koizumi to our stores. And next morning he showed up, and we took the picture together. He was very friendly and smiling, and I was very grateful.
That's pretty awesome. Kevin, any thoughts on whether you might land another world leader there for this summit?
Well, we're not expecting that, but if it happens, we'll definitely be. But we are seeing some of the delegates arriving now, and it's really gratifying to actually be able to speak to them and tell them a little bit about Kananaskis and give them that warm Canadian hospitality.
I don't know if you can compare, Kevin, what the security is like now versus what it was like in 2002, because it is, I think, more significant. Is it hard to get around just as people who are running a business and living there?
Well, I think as you can expect, that security has been ramped up. And I think the one thing that we noticed in the first go around was that once the security was all set up, people that were actually wandering around, including the world leaders, felt quite protected and relaxed. So we were able to interact with a lot of them quite informally, like this chats, and there's a real relaxing atmosphere in the end. We'll see what happens this time around, but clearly, obviously, safety is top priority.
And Naoko, do you think that? It's exciting, but is it good for business, or it might have an adverse effect if you can't stay open for a couple of days?
Actually, we like and just enjoying this atmosphere, and I'm very happy to be part of the Kananaskis team, and I'd like to show the the beautiful Kananaskis to the world.
And, obviously, we expect that things will be described here, but, at the same time, to go through this experience the second time around has been an amazing experience.
And Kevin, if another world leader was going to wander into the Moose family kitchen, who would you hope for?
Well, obviously, the current Prime Minister Carney or Prime Minister Shiba would be wonderful, but we're happy to see anybody out here. To be honest, having people coming from all over the world has been truly an honor for us.
Well, listen, you're both delightful. I hope you get some good visitors, some high-profile visitors. Thank you so much, Kevin and Nelko, for speaking with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.